Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Centric. This being a show where I talk about crime dramas that I watch. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the season finale of Lethal Weapon. First off, I'm going to say that I think this is easily one of, if not the best episode of Lethal Weapon. It was a very sad and somber episode. Obviously, they continue to do what they always do. They blend the serious tone with the comedy. Obviously, it's just an outright action comedy crime drama. But I mean, obviously, this is picking up where Riggs has found out, Palmer's file about Miranda, and now he basically it's an episode of Riggs pushing the boundaries of crossing the lines that he normally. Obviously, Riggs crosses the lines, but never to the extremes that he did in this episode, going as far as busting Gideon out, which I didn't see that coming. Which I kind of I was thinking oh, that might be Riggs, but then I feel like if it was a cartel busting him out, there'd be more than one person. So I was like, oh, is that Riggs busting? It turns out it is Riggs. Mainly because Gideon gave that smug smile when he went into the elevator, almost like he knew they were going to break him out, which they would have eventually, but Riggs got to him first. What I found fascinating is the fact that you had Riggs covering up his tracks and everything, but Roger ain't no dummy. He actually figured it out. He's like, oh yeah, the fact of the matter is he didn't hurt the cops. The fact is all these shots, they seemed like they were just random, but it's no, they were precision. He even hit the side of the car where he knew there would be armor plating, and it's Riggs is trying his best to get Roger off of it, but Roger kind of slowly figures it out. Just because everything starts lining up, especially when, the way Riggs is acting a little funny and everything. So it's a situation where it's that's kind of a big part of the episode too. It's the fact is, Roger is torn between his loyalty to Riggs as his partner and his loyalty to just himself as well as his family. Because that was kind of the whole situation with Avery when he found out about what Avery had done in the past. It kind of brought up a problem where it's oh, we were such partners yet you lied to me. And it's kind of the same situation because you have Riggs not only capturing Gideon, torturing him, even pouring salt in his eyes because it's yeah, don't look at my wife. You don't ever get to look at her. But torturing him to the point using the back of a axe to break his hand and beating the crap out of him because he's up there gloating, being oh yeah, your wife, yeah, oh yeah, I killed her. The fact of the matter is you had those blueberry pancakes, and it just sets Riggs off. He's just doing everything he can to aggravate him because more so than anything, I think it's he kind of wanted Riggs to try and kill him. I mean, more so he didn't think Riggs would have it in him because it's Riggs, you're too much of a good guy. The fact is you don't have the stomach to kind of do that. It takes kind of tapping into that darker side of yourself to be able to torture and hurt someone, even under the circumstances of doing it for his family. There's even a point where Roger is with him and, kind of has his, doesn't tell anyone once he kind of figures out what Riggs is up to. And he ends up shooting Gideon, thinking it's all over. But at that point, when it comes back to it, it's Riggs okay, let's turn me in. And they're going to talk to Avery, but Roger lies about it and it covers for Riggs. Which he then immediately after Riggs leaves, it's I got to get a new partner. And he explains that to Riggs, but Riggs figured it out. It's no, Gideon lied. He wasn't there. I mean, it turns out later on he was, but the fact that he lied about us having blueberry pancakes, because the fact of the matter is I didn't have them, which they kind of explain that later on. It's because they were listening. They weren't actually watching him. So they knew he was going to make blueberry pancakes. They didn't know that he did never make them. But the fact is that it set Riggs off on being oh, I need to go. There's someone else. I need your help on this partner. But then Roger's no, because the fact of the matter is Roger is a very straight and narrow cop. And for him, it's you not only, because the fact is that he's covering for Riggs because he doesn't want Riggs to get in trouble because Riggs is his partner. He does care about him and he doesn't want him to suffer the ramifications for this. And because he also understands, he's yo, this is your wife and this is the person that hurt her. So I understand. But at the same time, he's I know you're reaching for it now. It's you're up here, you're drunk. Which he went back to drinking for obvious reasons. I mean, after going so far to get sober. I'm also surprised that there was no situation because she didn't pop up in the episode is Morena. I was kind of thinking I mean, granted, it's a situation where he's dead set on his situation, so the only person he's really going to talk to is Roger about it. But Roger's the fact of the matter is you told me at the beginning that you wouldn't kill yourself because Miranda would be disappointed in you. It's she'd be disappointed in what you're doing right now. The fact of the matter is you have the one choice. Do you want to live, Riggs? And if so, that means you have to let her go, which Riggs is I can't. I mean, especially after knowing this, because he was ready to move forward. The point, because the fact is, I mean, on a level, you could look at it from both ways because you look at it like that's very wrong of Roger to say that because it's like, and Riggs could have easily thrown it back in his face. It's like, what if the same thing happened to Trish? You know, would you want to forget her? It's like, no. The fact is, he can't move on. I mean, he can move on, but he can't forget her. Like, you know, because Roger describes it as you're drowning. You're just like this need for revenge and everything. Like, for him, it's like I said, he thought Riggs was grasping at straw. So it was a situation where it's like, you're so adamant about like, there's more to this that it just wasn't Gideon. So, and it sucks, dude, because it's like, the one person he thought would have his back is Roger, but Roger's got a point too, because it's like, I don't want to get caught up in all this. I'm a cop that plays by the rules. Yes, I've been the rules a little bit because you were my partner, but not to this extent, not to compromise my own beliefs and stuff like that. Which you have Riggs being like, well, he's about to leave and Trish pops up. She's like, Riggs, we love you. The fact is we're your family too. So don't just walk away. He's like, that he's like, I'm sorry. I'm surprised you didn't leave me behind before now. So thanks for sticking around as long as you did, Roger, and walks away. And Roger walks away too. And you have Trish being in the middle because Trish acts as, because that was a kind of, like, I showed you just like how, like, Trish was his input in this episode. Obviously, he ain't going into too many details because I guess it's a situation where he didn't want her to be kind of liable in a situation of like, oh, they could come question her later on about. So he was very vague about the details, but it's like, came to her about the whole Martin situation. Like, it's like, oh, I know he kind of did something really bad and everything. So, and for her, she does legitimately care about Riggs and understands, like, obviously, I don't even know if she ever found out the entire situation, but Riggs ends up learning from Delgado the truth because Delgado let it slip. He's like, oh yeah, listen to a man like Gideon. He's like, I never actually told you it was the man's name is Gideon. And then he's like thinking about the phone call because he had that whole beautiful moment at the beginning of the episode, like the day of the accident. And it turns out it's like Delgado has been part of the cartel. He's kind of like their inside source. And he was warning Miranda because he didn't want her to be, it's just like, oh, like get her out of town. But it, I mean, and for Riggs, it's like Delgado is just as responsible. Yes, because the fact of the matter is he hid that. Like, because he was part of that world and everything. He's like, oh yeah, the reason why I was part of it, the fact of the matter is I have other daughters to be worried about. But the fact of the matter is you're not even worried about getting justice for this one daughter. Obviously you keep telling Riggs that he needed to move on and stuff like that. And the fact is, I mean, like, it almost makes you look back on every other conversation he's ever had with Riggs. Like, oh, we missed you here at the family dinners and stuff like that. It's like horseshit. Look at you. You're like so full of crap because the fact is you even brought up like, oh, the fact is Riggs missed like that 1 year anniversary of like her funeral or whatever. And it's like, you had the audacity to say all that when you're guilty. You're part of the reason why she died. Which I figured as much because when Flores originally appeared in the show, he was kind of like, oh yeah, Riggs thinks this is about him. I figured they had to do something with her dad. But I was like, it's because it's like, oh, her dad's doing a really good job and it's meant to make him back down. I was like, no, he was in his employment and it was meant to like keep him in check is what that whole situation was about. So they end up kidnapping Roger and now they have Riggs too. And you even have Delgado being like, oh, I never wanted it to end like this, Riggs. And he's like, well, Ronnie, there's only one way for it to end. This is how it was always supposed to end. And once again, I brought it up earlier, the whole comedy element to it as well, where you have like them going back and forth. The fact is, Roger's like, you know what's messed up about this? I'm gonna miss my own son's graduation for you. And he's like, and Riggs is like, yeah, that is pretty messed up. But you want to know what might be even more messed up? What? It's like, the fact is, you're here being, beat up and captured and tortured for the fact is that you're my partner, even though technically we aren't partners anymore because you got a new partner. He's like, yeah, that is more messed up. And it's just having that back and forth of like, oh, you found out about Delgado. Like, when did you find out? It's like, I found out about 4. When did you find out? He's like, about 3:15. It's like, did you look at your watch afterwards? He's like, no. I got like an amazing internal clock. He's like, really? What time is it right now? He's like, oh, it's like 6 something. He's like, okay, hey, one of you bad guys, you got a watch? Tell me what time it is. But, God, like I said, like kind of going back to it though, like, obviously the show, like I said, had that good, like, humorous side to it, but man, did it have that dark side to it, where we saw Roger getting tortured. And you even have, once again, Gideon running his mouth, and even Roger's kind of saying, like, hey, don't stop, don't do that. Turns out, Miranda actually survived the crash. He actually had to go over, he went over and suffocated her. Just because he wanted Riggs to die knowing the whole truth. And it's just like, in that moment, the moment you said that, you were as good as dead. Riggs and him went full blown, took out the other guys. Roger kind of basically electrocuted, and one guy's like, yeah, payback's a bitch. And then Riggs went up against the other guy, and they struck him and Gideon. I was like, yeah, he's kicking Gideon's ass. And then they land on the tracks, and he's like, saying like, tell me where Flores is. And luckily he gets out of the way. I was kind of hoping at the last second he pulled himself and Gideon, just kind of throw Gideon to the side. But it's like, no, for what Gideon said, I was like, I'm not too surprised. He let Gideon die in a pretty brutal way too, on the damn tracks. They didn't even cut to it or anything for obvious reason. I mean, it's Fox, they're not trying to be that brutal, but man, that was brutal. But as it trains past, you see Riggs and Roger kind of looking and nodding towards each other, and Riggs leaves. Roger loving the fact, I love the fact that he shows up at RJ's graduation, bloodied and no shoes on, because he wasn't going to miss out on that moment of like, a proud parent's moment, but it is a situation where, he went looking for Riggs, but Riggs didn't pop up, and he talked to Delgado and find out Riggs went to Mexico after Flores. I didn't pay too much attention, but it did seem like the trailer obviously was naturally empty, but there was a picture of Miranda you normally see, so I can only assume he took that with him. So, and the fact is, you have, Riggs telling like Flores is like, don't worry, I'm coming after you. And you have Roger being like, I can't, like, he's like, I can't, telling Trish that he can't come to bed. And she's like, okay, do what you need to do, but make sure we have that one rule that you will always come back to me. He's like, I promise. And so it's like he's going after Riggs because he can't let Riggs do this on his own, especially because, he's even, like, that's another thing too. Delgado was like, yeah, forget about Riggs. It's a suicide mission. It's like, he's doing this for the woman he loved that was your daughter, you piece of filth. And the fact is, you're quickly casting him away. You're like, oh, he was your son. You act like you loved him so much. And it's like you just cast him away like that. Because, the fact of the matter, it just shows you how much he loved your daughter, but it brings into question your own love for your own daughter. It's like, you piece of crap. Like, you're saying you're doing this for all your other daughters. What about Miranda? What about honoring her? Yeah, I get that you were fearful for your life, but the fact of the matter is, it's a situation where he's not the type of guy that you say no to, but still, it sucks. And that is where we end the episode off. Like I said, just overall a fantastic episode. Like I'm sitting here, I'm really leaning more to the fact is I think it is legitimately my favorite episode. It was a very good way to end off the season. Granted, I will admit the numbering's a bit odd because apparently this is like episode 18. I didn't know where this was going to fall, like spectrum wise of like episodes. I was thinking maybe 13 initially, but obviously it went past it. So I was like, oh, it's going to be 20 something. And then I happened to, what was it? Yeah, I happened to look it up like earlier this week, and I was like, wait, what? The season finale? Holy crap. So, like always, I'm going into this not knowing if this is getting renewed for a second season. I really hope so, because obviously I'm in love with these characters. Obviously the storyline of just like I love Damian Wayans, and I think the actor's name is Clayne Crawford. Like, he does a fantastic job. Besides, I need him to be on something because obviously I don't think I'm ever going to get the more rectified. I think that's done, especially when you consider the fact is that 3 of the main actors are going, like, he's hero on Lethal Weapon, Abigail Spencer is on Timeless, and the fact is that the main actor who played Daniel is also on something else too. So I don't know if I'm going to get more rectified. So it's like, I appreciate seeing them in other things, but it's just like, I love this portrayal of these characters. Like I said, I still have yet, I talked about it at the very beginning about like, oh, I should go watch the Lethal Weapon movies. I have yet to do that. So I don't know. It just kind of put me in a mood to kind of go back and watch the Lethal Weapon, at least the first movie. I really want to go ahead and watch all of them, but in particular, the first movie, just to kind of compare and see where they are. Because like I said, this whole storyline about Riggs' wife, I don't ever remember that from the movies, but granted, that might have been a storyline. I have a vague memory of him being very suicidal, but I couldn't really remember what it was for. So maybe that is something pulled directly from, excuse me, the movie. So, like I said, very fantastic. I definitely would love to see more. I hope on everything Fox does renew it, because I'd love to see what they do with the second season. Because obviously, there's Roger, obviously more adventures with Roger and Riggs, but also I'm very curious I always love that I keep doing that. That's also a thing that you might have noticed too. I never call Roger by his last name, Murtaugh, but I always call Riggs. I don't know why that works like that. But nevertheless, obviously, there's more characters that I'm very curious to find out who would have been Roger's new partner. But I'm also curious to find out, like, obviously there's characters you really didn't get to learn too much about. Scorsese didn't really get to learn much about. Bailey, or Cruz. 'Cause I'm definitely the most interested in like what's going on with Cruz's backstory, and just I'd love to see, like I said, legitimate. I'd love to see what they do with the second season. So, because I'm also interested to see what would happen with Riggs. Like when it was all said and done, obviously he'd get his revenge, but what happened after that? Because you know it'd probably be like the first episode with him getting his revenge, and then finally coming back to LA, probably trying to readjust. I mean, they probably have to cover their tracks a little bit too, to make sure that none of this leads back to Riggs being the one that got Gideon away. I mean, maybe it'd be a situation where it's kind of settled, but obviously it seems like it's settled, but obviously it comes back to bite them in the ass later on in the season. Also, what it means for Riggs and Palmer, it's like obviously like she kind of walked away because she knew she probably tried to get in contact with him subsequently since, but you know, obviously he's focused on this. So what that means for them as well. So just so many questions that I'd like to see, like, you know, I was to get answered in another season. So, especially after like blowing me away with such a fantastic season finale. Like I said, that's just my opinion. Maybe other people won't agree, but that, I mean, like always, I feel like I should add that. That's always, these are always just my opinions. I enjoy what I enjoy. I know not everyone has my likes, you know, and I mean, that's the beauty of things. Just everyone has their own opinions, and it's just mine. So, I should probably start kind of adding that in there to other things too. I don't know. Nevertheless. Really, that's all I want to talk about in this episode. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.